SBC Media.
Brazil, a global economic powerhouse, deeply passionate about sports, and now home to one of the hottest markets in gaming. And we're giving it the full SBC treatment. Join industry leaders, market experts, and all the major players in the country for 3 days of content, exhibition, and epic networking at the first ever SBC Summit Rio.
SBC Leaders connects the gambling industry's top-tier operators and associations to share the best ideas, collaborate on solving the biggest issues, and push innovation throughout the betting and gaming industry. If you're an operator and want to join the discussion, visit sbcleaders.com for more information.
Over the past few months, the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario has fined 2 operators for enabling problematic gambling behavior, with high rollers losing millions playing online. The group is taking aim at VIP programs in the province and raising some important questions about how to balance responsible gambling and customer retention. We'll try to walk the fine line between the two as we break down the story on today's episode of iGaming Daily. I'm Jessica Welman, editor of SBC Americas and Canadian Gaming Business, and I'm joined by my senior journalist, but I think for this week, we should also note the editor of Canadian Gaming Business magazine, Charlie Horner.
Hello. Yeah, it's nice to talk about Canada for every once in a while. It's been a long time since we have done, so yeah, let's dig in.
Yeah, it's good to be talking about Canada. I just wish the news was a little more positive. So essentially, the big news was last week with PointsBet. The AGCO has fined PointsBet $100,000 for responsible gambling violations related to a customer who lost $500,000 in the span of just a couple of months. Essentially, this customer should have been flagged as a potentially at-risk customer. And not only were they not flagged and they were marketed to when they shouldn't have been, but the company allegedly offered them as much as $35,000 in bet credit. Not the first instance we've had of this either. The AGCO just a couple of months prior had a similar incident with Apollo Entertainment where the fine was $150,000, and similar situation, a single player dropped $2 million in the span of 4 months, and nobody was really intervening the way that they should have. Charlie, does this news surprise you at all?
I'm not sure whether surprise is the right word. I think maybe a little bit of surprise about the figures involved, the fact that these customers are allegedly losing millions in the process. But I think more generally, this is probably borne out the incredibly intense competition that is in Canada at the moment. Well, in the Ontario market at least. There's over 40 operators there. There's over 70 different brands all vying for that customer retention. And, we've seen that, they're not allowed to advertise bonuses or inducements. So I think these operators are trying to do as much as they can to try and keep those users they have got. And the use of these type of VIP schemes, they're not new. But I think the fact that these customers are losing so much money and the fact that they aren't being intervened or at least checked to see if they can afford to lose this much money is something that is probably going to shock quite a few people.
We talked about it a little bit on a previous episode of iGaming Daily where Martin hosted and spoke with Lou, Little Ted, and myself about just how different areas of the world handle responsible gambling and affordability in particular. And Lou and I were both saying, like, in Latin America and in North America, if you were to try to do affordability checks on people, I don't think it would land very well. There is just something about the culture around here that it's like, well, don't tell me how I can spend my money. That I don't know if that would necessarily translate the way that it has in some European markets. But it is an interesting question of, how do you handle a VIP player? Because when we talk about responsible gambling, for some people, $100 is a huge sum of money that they can't afford to lose. And for other people, $100 is relatively meaningless. So the problem with some of these prescriptive things is you would think anybody losing $500,000 is in a problematic situation, but you just don't know enough about who these people are to fully balance. Although I think in the instance of PointsBet, they did have that kind of trigger where they should have been aware. Yes. Why? Because they repeatedly canceled withdrawal requests. This is always a sign that you might have a problem. If you do actually win some money on the site, you decide you're going to withdraw it, and then you cancel that request so you can continue to gamble with the money. These are the kinds of things that are considered markers for potential harm.
Yeah, I think there's those kind of markers of harm, the fact that he's trying to withdraw and then cancel those requests for the withdrawals. But then I think that also that there probably should be a certain threshold of value of losses, or maybe the amount of times that a player has lost when an intervention should be made. I don't know the regulatory framework in some of these markets is to the letter and to the line, but I would have thought that maybe in some jurisdictions that they would identify some sort of volume or value of losses before an intervention would be made.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank at any particular North American regulator that has those kinds of loss limits in place. Typically what you see instead is that you can, as a consumer on the app, put in the loss limits that you want. Again, with the PointsBet issue, I think also this particular customer had, placed certain limits on their account and then removed them. And the rule was that you needed to sit out 24 hours after removing those kinds of caps before you were allowed to gamble again. And they did not make the player observe that 24-hour period.
I also think that there's the risk that putting the responsibility on the player to impose those kind of measures is difficult when you do have so much choice in a market where you could sign up with PointsBet and set your limits on PointsBet, and then you're not allowed to bet on PointsBet, but you could go to Bet365 and open a new account without those limits, without those controls, and then you can spend more than you can afford to lose on a different site. So I think having it solely on the player to set those limits is, maybe I'm playing a little bit of devil's advocate, but I think just relying on the player to set those controls is maybe a little bit dangerous.
I think I'm inclined to agree. I just hear like the average American being like, "Don't talk to me like you know me." I know what I can handle, but in these situations, like, this is not necessarily the person that should be making these. And then, to take a step back, it sounds like in both the Apollo case and the PointsBet case, it wasn't just that they were losing all this money and they weren't stopping them, but in the case of PointsBet, that you also continued to direct market to them, and you issued more than the AGCO statement said that the operator allegedly issued more than $35,000 in credit to keep them on the site. Hey, I'm sorry you're losing. I'm sorry you've had a bad run. Here's $5,000. I'm sorry things are going bad. Take the night off. We've got tickets to the Raptors game. These kinds of things that VIP programs offer are what I think is really the first point of attack, right?
Yeah, I think those kind of retention strategies can be particularly dangerous especially when the platform knows how much money the player is losing to give them the rewards, to give them the free tickets to shows and sporting events. From a psychological perspective, you kind of feel loyal to that brand because they've given you so much that you feel like you have to keep on playing with them.
And you're right, as you mentioned earlier, Ontario is an incredibly competitive market with online casino and sports betting. I think you really see this happening more on the casino side. We're talking about PointsBet. If people are assuming this is a sports bettor, it's entirely possible this was on the online casino side of things in addition to the sports betting side of things. Apollo was definitely an online casino case. You're right that if you have a high volume customer that is very loyal to you, I completely understand as an organization why you want to do things to incentivize them staying with you and continuing to play on your site. But with whales, as I'll call them, these high rolling VIP types, where is the line between, keeping them involved and encouraging behavior that is probably not in the best interest of this person?
Yeah, I think it's a very fine line, and I think it's something that regulators will probably be looking into as North American markets continue to evolve and mature, because they are a big part of retention, especially in these more competitive places. But I think you're right that the measures have to be in place to look after those players, even if they are rich, even if they are high rollers. There is a certain point where even Jeff Bezos would lose enough money that it's going to damage his pockets at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, you mentioned regulators. Props to the AGCO, because I actually don't think U.S. regulators have done much in the way of cracking down on VIP programs. And the fact that AGCO has been willing to fine pretty heavily compared to other things, 2 different operators, and that they are keeping an eye on this, I find encouraging. And it's a step in the right direction that I don't think you've necessarily seen in their neighbor to the south.
Absolutely. I think the AGCO, the entire framework in Ontario from the beginning was, we're going to be extremely collaborative with this. We're going to look at other markets. We're going to talk to fellow regulators in Europe, in Australia, in other markets, and we're going to do this right. And we're going to have the standards in place. And if operators do flout those standards, then there will be repercussions. And I think they've probably stuck to their word throughout the most of the 20 months that this market's been in place. Obviously, there's consultations and other things going on with the advertising side of things. But again, I think that is all part of the dialogue that they said that they would have from day one.
Yeah, and, compared to other fines within Ontario that I've seen, 150,000 and 100,000 are pretty high compared to some of the other transgressions we've seen. I think there was a release a while back that 3 operators were fined a combined $70,000 for offering uncertified slot machines. Can you think of any other incidents in Ontario that were ended up with fines?
Yeah, I think another trio of operators were fined. I think about $15,000 each for offering bets on youth leagues that are not part of the certified sports betting catalogue. But yeah, 15,000 each. Let's this is a massive increase on these $15,000 ones. It kind of tells you where the priorities are really in what they're trying to stamp out, and customer protection is really part of their priorities.
Yeah, and they've got those advertising regs too that kind of fit into this same boat. If you head over to Canadian Gaming Business right now, you can see some of this. The AGCO did meet with Canadian Gaming Association and some operators to get feedback on those regs and how to fine tune them so that they're a little more precise and prescriptive, because I think the initial response was they were a little bit vague. I'll also shout out CGA on December 5th is going to have a meeting in connection with its annual meeting that is specifically about developing an internal kind of code of marketing, similar to what we've seen the AGA do. And they've engaged with Responsible Gambling Council and Ad Canada to develop these bullet points so that it's not just a regulator telling them what to do, but that operators as part of the trade group are coming in and saying, we're already holding ourselves to this certain standard, which is a great step.
I think it's a great step, like you say, and it's good that we're being proactive about these things, and there is dialogue going on between operators, the trade bodies, and the regulators. I think it's only a positive thing.
Yeah. I want to bring up this. So we have written about this similar kind of case in the U.S. Involving a VIP player named Sam A. Antar. But I'll be honest, this case is a little perilous. Sam A. Antar alleges that BetMGM had him roped in hook, line, and sinker as a problem gambler, that he had told his VIP host that he was a problem gambler, and that nonetheless, the VIP host kept issuing him credit, kept enticing him to play. He has a preponderance of text messages that have been entered into evidence. On the flip side of this, part of his lawsuit also claimed that like the machines were rigged to lose when he was winning, were rigged to time out and disconnect from the internet when he was winning, which, feels a little dubious as a thing that's actually happening. And then in the meantime, he does also have kind of like a concurrent case where he is being convicted of defrauding people. And part of his defense in that was that he was an addicted gambler. And that's why he took this money from these people and then spent it on the site. So I think you're seeing glimpses of this in the US with these VIP programs. It's just the glimpse that we've gotten has not been something issued from a regulator. It's been from what we'll call, to use a literary term, an unreliable narrator telling us how things are going here. In Europe, have we seen much in the way of VIP program crackdowns or issues on VIP schemes?
Yeah, well, I'll keep it at home, really, because the UK Gambling Commission actually updated its rules a few years ago now. I think it was in 2020, with regards to VIP customers. And those rules were basically, don't have VIP schemes unless you're making sure that these VIP customers can afford to lose what they are losing as part of like your leisurely spend, your disposable income that you don't need for, important things that we all need to pay for. And again, really early, like we were mentioning, making sure that there's no evidence of problem gambling, like we were talking about with the cancelling your withdrawals and those kind of things, those signs. So really, the Gambling Commission was just making sure that we're not, taking advantage of these so-called VIP consumers. And from the regulator itself, they said that I think around 70% of the VIP schemes have been closed down, or there's a 70% reduction in VIP schemes since it was brought in. And I think that was only in a short period of time as well. So clearly effective.
We'll see if this translates to the States where, Florida in its opening week had somebody bet, I believe it was like $50,000 on a parlay that then hit for $5 million. All about the Bengals losing, by the way. So I guess congrats to you, sir. But I was not happy that this came in for you. We also had somebody put a huge bet on a massive underdog to win outright in Florida. And we continue to hear about the Mattress Max, and there are people on Twitter whose whole shtick is talking about these huge bets that people are willing to take from kind of fishy, whaley players that I think we're still a ways away from getting to where the UK is, because we're still in the process of just fully glorifying this behavior, let alone cracking down on it. I don't think I really have seen much in the European market where you're hearing about these people putting in huge wagers on things.
No, I think this is one thing I've noticed, working on the North American beat for the last couple of years, is that generally bets seem to be higher in North America than they are in Europe. The recreational player in Europe, or particularly in the UK, their average stakes aren't that high, whereas I'm, fairly regularly seeing bets in the hundreds of dollars in North America. And then I just think that the US particularly is a lot more aiming to be a lot more liberal in the way it works with these markets. As like you said earlier, people don't want interference in their bank accounts. People don't want checks to see if they can afford to lose money. That they're free. They want to spend the money the way they choose.
I will say the average bet size here is still relatively small. It's, I think it's like $6 or something in that vein, which is kind of all the more reason why operators are very keen to keep these higher volume, higher unit people in the fold, because that one outlier is more important than, 300 me's who put in $100 a year to bet on sports and that sort of thing. But yeah, we're still at the point where we're really glamorizing this. And I think we're not going to take, that's kind of step one. And you're hearing some people having conversations about how it is to present these kinds of bets and what's a responsible way of presenting them, which actually is a good segue into kind of the other news of the week. ESPN Bet did launch on Tuesday. I was sitting in a bar last night and happened to see what was previously called Daily Wager, that I think is now called ESPN Bet Live, is the name of the rebranded program that is the gambling focused program. I put this shot of it on my Twitter account that they had everybody do picks yesterday, and they showed the results of those picks as well as how many units you would be down if you had bet all of them. And I got quite a bit of engagement on, we'll see how long this lasts. We'll see if ESPN's doing this in 2 months, when it's like, if you had followed all of our advice for the past 2 months, you would be down 600 units or something like that. So what else have we seen kind of with the ESPN Bet launch, Charlie? Anything catch your eye?
I think that one of the things I've seen floating around on social media is the fact that, everyone's celebrating that it's at the top of the download charts on the app stores, and that's not necessarily indicative of success. Obviously, it's launched, and so everyone needs to download the app. All the former Barstool players need to go and download it. So it's, it's likely to go and reach the top of the charts. I would say let's see the figures from the state reports when they do come out. But I am sensing a real bit of anticipation, excitement that it's launched, and I don't know. Does the product feel any different from Barstool?
I, to be fair, did not have the Barstool product on my phone. I did download and look around at ESPN Bet. I'll just tell you, it kind of looks and feels like a very generic experience. There's a couple of images of Scott Van Pelt and Elle Duncan, who is another reporter for them, on when you land on it. But as soon as you kind of dive into the app, it doesn't feel ESPN-y at all. They do have a couple of promoted bets, one from Elle Duncan, one from Mike Greenberg, which we'll see how mad Massachusetts gets about this. That remains to be seen. But yeah, I'll say it's an app. It works. It's nothing particularly fancy and overwhelming, but at the same time, like, I don't think, what else are you gonna, like, I'm gonna hit place bet and Pat McAfee is gonna like pop up on screen and be like, you did it. I don't know how you could make it more ESPN-y. I don't know if there's I think we're complaining that it doesn't feel like ESPN, but I don't know what you could possibly do to make that feel any different. All right. With that, I am going to go continue to check out the ESPN Bet app. You guys continue to check out what's going on at SBC Americas and, of course, CanadianGamingBusiness.com. And be sure to check in with us on next week's episode of iGaming Daily.
SBC Media.